ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः. So we are meeting after a long time. I've been out traveling to South America for about 40 days. There was no class. So the previous Sunday class was on Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master, which is the English translation of Sri Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasang by Swami Sarvasthananda in Bengali. And this, the alternate Sunday class, is on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, which is also the English translation of the Bengali original Sri Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita. So we follow the 5 volume edition, the original edition, which was published in Bengali during Master Mahashay's lifetime. And we completed the first part. The second part, which the conversation was held on, uh, the date is 4th June 1883. And the venue is Dakshineshwar. Sri Ramakrishna is with devotees at the Kali temple, Bhavatani Kali temple in Dakshineshwar. So that is the conversation which took place on 4th June 1883. That is 3 years before his Mahasamadhi. And the subheading that we were discussing, or we had begun to discuss, was salvation and vision of one's own real self by Guru's grace. And Thakur, that is Sri Ramakrishna, grants fearlessness. So now this, as you all know, the 1st January of every year is celebrated as the Kalpataru Day. For most of the devotees who visit the place of Mahasamadhi of Sri Ramakrishna, that is Kashipur Garden House, there was an incident which took place on the 1st of January 1886, the year in which Sri Ramakrishna entered into Mahasamadhi, passed away in August. So that day is known as the Kalpataru Day. But Swami Sardananji says Kalpataru is one way of expressing that particular day. But according to Sardananda, if you remember, he called that day Abhaidana, or Sri Ramakrishna's self-revelation day, the day he revealed his real nature and also conferred fearlessness to the devotees. So now this topic also, M has written a footnote that this was the day when Sri Ramakrishna grants fearlessness to the devotees who had assembled in Dakshineshwar. This was much before the 1st January 1886. This is 1883, 3 years before that. So Sri Ramakrishna is now, the conversation begins. He's talking to M, one who recorded the gospel. He says, Sri Ramakrishna says, some think that they will never gain jnana and bhakti, and that they are bound souls. So this is the typical Semitic, the Christian theology, where man is basically, essentially a sinner, and it is only through the grace of the Savior or the grace of God or his messenger who intercedes on his behalf and grants us salvation. So the only condition of salvation for people who are originally sinners, that is the Christian theology. And obviously the Brahmo followers or the Brahmo devotees who took a few ideas from each religion and they tried to create a new religion or new faith based on some of the elements of Christianity, some of the elements from Islam, also Hinduism, especially the Upanishads, and they vehemently opposed worship of an idol in any form. So they were against the Dakshineshwar Kali temple. Though Keshav Chandra Sen used to visit Dakshineshwar Kali temple and sit at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna, which many of the followers did not like. Said this is because Sri Ramakrishna always, I mean, he began his spiritual life by worshipping Ma Kali, which is, according to the Brahmos, idol worship and should be uh, avoided, because that is one of the reasons they believed was why Hinduism did not fulfill the aspirations of the devotees. So they did not like this idol Murti Puja and other things, like some others, Arya Samaj also believed in that. So naturally, some of the ideas they borrowed from other Semitic religions, especially Christianity, was that basically we are all bound souls. And bound souls means we are basically sinners. Though, and to save our souls, we have to depend on the grace of God. So Sri Ramakrishna is trying to refute this idea, saying Hinduism doesn't believe that a man is born hopeless and he's that they are bound souls and they will never attain jnana or bhakti through their own efforts. They just have to pray. That's the typical Semitic idea of Semitic religions. Though if you read the Bible and the other scriptures, you will see that there is a lot of scope for jivas or aspirants to realize God through their own effort. Whereas somehow, when it was the basic ideas of the Bible or Christianity were taken up by the church, or it was preached in a very organized way. So somehow this theology came into existence that you need the grace of a savior to save your souls, otherwise you are doomed forever. So that is why the idea of conversion also came, that unless you uh, get the grace of God and His Savior, you are doomed. You can't do anything through your own efforts. But Hinduism believes that whether you believe in God with form, without form, or you don't believe in a God at all, still spiritual practices, the essential ideas of Vedas or the Sanatana Dharma is that through one's own effort, through a combination of one's own effort, or entirely through one's effort, which is jnana, and also combining it with bhakti, you can progress in spiritual life. And added to that, if the grace of God is there, the bound souls can be saved, or they can attain moksha or mukti, which is the same as salvation. But Sri Ramakrishna gives a beautiful example now. He says, when Guru's grace descends on someone, this is according to Hinduism. So, when he says something that they will never gain jnana and bhakti, that they are bound souls, he was indirectly referring to the Brahmo ideas, and which were very popular, especially among the younger generation, including Swami Vivekananda, because they felt like most of the so-called educated Indians felt in those days, that our religion, or maybe the degradation that India suffered, was because we were worshipping idols, that our religion was responsible for all the misery, which was not uh, which was not the actual fact. Swami Vivekananda points that out. He says it is because of our inability to understand the scriptures and our religion, and mainly because of our weakness. He says one third of our misery is because of our weakness. Vedanta always speaks of strength. But all the weak ideas that entered India because of wrong understanding of our own religion and other ideas that we imported from other cultures because of colonization, he says that resulted in making a very vibrant race, a very strong race, very weak. And that physical weakness was one of the reasons of our downfall. So he said, don't blame the Vedic religion, which teaches you strength. So Sri Ramakrishna also gives a beautiful example. Though he says Guru's grace is necessary, he says one need not fear and think that they are eternally bound souls, they are helpless at the mercy of some savior who alone can save them. But if they try hard, or if they use self effort and a little bit of help from a guru who just helps you to progress, but the progress has to come through your own effort. So he gives an example how this hypnotization takes place. And so the best example is that which Swami Vivekananda spoke in America. He gave this example which he heard from his own guru. So you see, the original is here. Though everybody thinks it was Swami Vivekananda who told that story for the first time. So it was Sri Ramakrishna, and it is recorded in 83, just after maybe Swami Vivekananda. So he might have, Swami Vivekananda came to uh, Ramakrishna. So he must have heard this story, and then he spoke many times in America, if you see, including the Parliament of Religions. He mentioned this story, what Hindus believe in. And to express it so nicely, this story which he heard from his master was referred to whenever he spoke of the basic ideas of Vedanta, how they differ from the Semitic religions. So he says a tigress came into a flock of goats. It's a famous story. When it sprang on its prey, it gave birth to a cub. The tigress died. Unfortunately, she died. So she wanted to perhaps attack a flock of goats. But when she was trying to do that, she was carrying a cub, and she gave birth to a cub, in fact. But in the process, she died. So unfortunately, the cub was orphaned, and it grew up in the flock of goats because there was no other tiger nearby, or where the cub could grow in the company of tigers. So it grew up in the flock of goats. The goats ate grass, and so did the cub, because it's very natural for goats to be vegetarian and eat grass. So it developed the same habit, though it was a tiger. They bleated, so the cub also began to bleat. So it forgot that it had the capacity to roar like a tiger. So the cub grew to become a big tiger. Obviously, it grew, but it never had the luxury of company of other tigers. So it grew with the goats. And one day, another tiger happened to come into the flock of goats, maybe to hunt them or to kill them. And it was amazed to see a grown up tiger eating grass. So naturally, it ran towards it, and it was not big enough. I mean, it was not as big as the tiger. So it grabbed it in its paws, and it tried to bleat instead of roaring. Whenever a tiger is attacked, obviously you expect it to roar or at least put up a fight. But this tiger was just bleating like a goat. The wild tiger dragged it to the latter also. I mean, the tiger who had grown up who grew in the company of this uh, goats began to bleat. So the wild tiger decided to show his real nature. So he dragged it to a pond and said, "Look at your face in this water. You are exactly like me." So the tiger looked, and then he says, "Here is some meat, you eat it." Saying so, it forced the meat into the mouth of the grass eating tiger. It at first refused to take it because it was not used to eating meat, and it began to bleat. But once having tasted blood, it began to eat the meat, because that is the true nature of a tiger. It will not survive on grass for long. But anyway, the wild tiger said, "Have you understood now? You are just like me. Now accompany me to the forest." And then it started roaring. That is how the story goes. And then it said, "Let us now go. Don't stay in the company of these goats, otherwise you will become like a goat." So Sri Ramakrishna gives this example and he says, if the grace of the Guru dawns, there is no fear. The Guru makes you understand who you really are. The big tiger who came and saved this goat and saved that tiger who was in the company of goats and had to tell him that you are actually a tiger, you are not a goat. Unfortunately, the company of goats, you are behaving and talking and even bleating like a goat. So you have to gather that strength. So the idea here is, by the grace of the Guru, if one is shown the right path, that's the only role of the Guru, to show the right path. Then there is no fear, that original fear that because of hypnotization, that we are weak, we are sinners. So if he makes you understand that is the only thing he needs to do, then you have to reveal or explore and find out your true nature. That's why he says, if you practice spiritual disciplines, the Guru tells you everything. Do this now and that later. In time, one begins to understand what is real and what is unreal. The Lord is the reality and the word illusory. So Swami Vivekananda used this example in his talks, especially in San Francisco, when he said that in the company of goats or in the company of the worldly people, we feel that we are helpless, we are a lot of fear enters us, and there's so much of ignorance. Because of this ignorance, we feel weak, we feel hypnotized into the reality, into convincing ourselves that we are helpless. So if the Lord is the reality and the world is temporary at the most. When you use the word Nitya Anitya, in Bengali the word used is, the Lord is Nitya and Jagat Anitya. So that is how the Bengali refers to the Bengali gospel. But unfortunately, there is no uh, translation available. So here they have translated it as real and illusory or unreal, which gives a wrong idea that the world is unreal, which nobody will accept, because the world is, of course, it is real. It appears to be real, at least when we perceive it. But the real translation of anitya is it is temporary. It doesn't have an eternal value. It is there now, but after a certain period, it is not timeless like the soul. God is timeless, the soul is timeless, Paramatma is timeless and eternal. Whereas the reality, however nice, however beautiful, and we would like it to be permanent, we would like our lives, physical bodies to be permanent, we would like our mm, uh, property to be permanent, our money, everything that we possess, we want. But unfortunately, the reality is such that the world has to be temporary. By its very nature, Prakriti is temporary. So, to understand that, you need the Guru's help, that it is something which is temporary. So, you live in that temporary world, doesn't matter. But keep your mind on reality. Lord is the only reality. That is what the tiger told the other tiger, who thought it was just like a goat. It was fit enough to bleed, but he said, no, you are a tiger. You see, you are just like me. So that is what the Guru is supposed to do. He has to tell the disciple that this is your real nature. Now you have to dehypnotize yourself. As Swami Vivekananda said, you have to dehypnotize yourself that you are the sheep or you are the goat. And now tell yourself that you are a tiger. So that is the moral or the essence of the story. So, and then Sri Krishna says, even pretense of spiritual practice is useful. You need not be a full timer when it comes to spiritual practice, because you have a temporary world to deal with. You have your life, you have your household, you have your profession. So, though you know it is temporary, you cannot give it up. So, even if you practice a little pretense means you do a little bit of spiritual practice. In fact, he says even imitation is good. A Jivan Mukta may live in the household, that is the subheading. He gives an example. He gives a very crude example, Sri Ramakrishna, but through this parable, he explains what he is advising the householders, that even a little practice, even if it is imitation to begin with, you imitate somebody, you imitate the great prophets. We can't be like Christ, we can't be like Buddha, we can't be like Vivekananda, but even imitation is useful. How? He gives an example. So one night, this how Sri Ramakrishna taught the gospel, and his way of teaching was like Buddha. Just teach through stories, not through complex philosophy, which most of the philosophers do. He used to tell simple stories like the tiger and the cub. Now the next story is very illuminating. He said how even imitation, we may not be full-time spiritual practitioners, but still, even if you do a little, that is why they say you go to monasteries, you go to place where there is satsang, and then a little bit of it, if it sticks to you, even that is good. According to Krishna, even a little bit of practice, in the Bhagavad Gita, it tells Arjuna, even a little bit of this practice saves you from great fear. So fearlessness can be only attained if you are holding on to the eternal reality, which is Lord, which is the Lord. So though it might begin with some kind of imitation of the real spiritual practice. If you can do real full as a full timer, then it is ideal. But even a little will do. So one night, a fisherman was casting his net in a garden pond. Obviously, he was trying to steal somebody else's pond. He was trying to cast his net and steal fish. When the owner of the garden came to know of it, what he did was he surrounded the fisherman. He knew that somebody is trying to steal my fish. So uh, all the other people of the household, they surrounded, and all his men, they knew that the pond has to be surrounded so that we will catch him. It was a big house, obviously. So they surrounded, and from different sides, they tried to come to the pond and catch him. They started searching for him with torches, etc., because perhaps it was a big garden in a pond, where a pond was there, where they heard the noise, and they suspected that there was a thief. So they surrounded the whole and approached the pond from different sides, and they had torches with them. In the meantime, the fisherman had smeared the fisherman who knew that they are all approaching with lights and torches and other things. So what he did, he used his presence of mind. He smeared his body with some ash, which is typical of monks, who sadhus who used to wander, and immediately dropping everything in the pond. Had come to steal, but he just dropped everything and imitated, as if he is a monk. Perhaps he was wearing the dress like a monk. So he sat under the tree, immediately applied ash and with beads and other things. He imitated a sadhu. The men looked for the fisherman everywhere, I mean the thief, but they could not find him. They only saw a sadhu with ash smeared on his body, sitting under a tree meditating. They did not know that he was the one culprit, but anyway, and he acted as if he was deep in meditation. So the next day, the whole neighborhood came to know that there was a thief who had come, but somehow he escaped. But these people who were searching for the thief, they found a monk or a sadhu meditating, and naturally, a sadhu is respected. So the next day, the whole neighborhood was agog with the news that a sadhu of high spiritual attainment had arrived in the garden, and he was definitely trying to imitate and imitate as if people who meditated a real sadhu, and try to show them that he was one who was deeply spiritual in nature. Anyway, even this imitation had its effect, and many people went to the sadhu, offered him flowers, fruit, sandesh, and sweetmeats to show their respect. They also offered him a lot of money. Then the fisherman said to himself, "What a wonder! I am not a real sadhu, I am just imitating a sadhu." Yet people have so much devotion for me. Then should I continue my profession as a thief? Should I become a genuine sadhu? I would definitely get many more things other than what they are offering me. I would definitely realize God. There is no doubt about it. So he decided, that's why Sri Ramakrishna says, even the pretense of spiritual practice brought an awakening. We know the famous incident of Valmiki, Tulsidas, and all those people. Their examples are very often quoted. When people think they are hopeless or they have committed a lot of sins and there's no hope for them, for them to become spiritual, very often we give these two examples of Valmiki, who was a robber, was a murderer, in fact, and how he transformed. On one particular incident changed him and he became the great Valmiki who wrote the Ramayana, and also Tulsidas. We have discussed this incident. Tulsidas is very, because Valmiki, at least we can say it is, maybe uh, it's some kind of, though it is true, and the but the historicity of Tulsidas nobody can doubt. It happened only a few centuries ago, and Tulsidas was a saint who lived like us, who lived was a householder, had been married for quite some time, and was terribly attached to his wife, so much so that he did not allow her to even go to her father's house. Now and then she wanted to just go to be free, or maybe just enjoy her time in her parents' house. But he was so attached that he would somehow deny. And then finally, once when she really went and said, "Now you don't come, I'll go alone," he would normally follow her. He was so attached to his wife. That is how worldly Tulsidas was before he changed, before he became a great saint who composed the Ramcharitmanas. So the idea that if one is a sinner or one is attached to the word, he cannot change. That Sri Ramakrishna is trying to show that even a thief, because of this incident, the pretense of spiritual practice brought an awakening. But in Tulsidas's case, you will find that he follows his wife, though she had warned him not to come, and he realized that she had crossed the Ganga, the river, and gone on the other side. And it was the boats, there was a big storm, and the boats had stopped ferrying people. So, without caring for the storm and other things, he just jumped into what he thought was a piece of log when it was a dead body floating, and holding on to that dead body, somehow managed, rotten dead body with full of smell, he managed to cross the river. That is how the story incident goes. He was so desperate to go to meet his wife there, that much he was so much attached to her. So when he finally manages to cross, and then you see how uh, he manages to reach the other bank in a very dirty condition. There's a lot of mud and all. In that state, he just goes towards the house. And to make it more dramatic, the story goes like this, that he reaches his wife's, that is her father's house, and she was staying on the first floor. So he somehow wanted, because it was midnight almost, and he wanted to just enter the house. The door was locked. So he thought of climbing, and he sees a rope, and he even climbs. So it is so dramatic that it was actually a snake. But he did not even mind that. He did not even have the sense to find out what kind of rope that is, whether it would. But somehow he manages to go to the top and then knock the door. And then the wife gets disgusted. She said she was so angry with her husband that she tells Tulsidas that if you had the same kind of attachment or desire, so much attachment for the Lord, your Rama, then you would have realized him by now. Why are you so much attached to me? And that comes as a blow. It was She was so rude with him that that was the turning point of his life. And then he realizes, just like this thief who just saw that, you see, even a little bit of acting, he was not even a real sadhu, just imitating the life of and imitating some kind of spiritual practice which genuine monks do. It has uh, people have started respect me if I really follow this spiritual practice. If it had been true sadhana, then they would have respected me so much more. But that was not the idea. His idea was that he would have realized God. So also his wife became a sort of a guru to Tulsidas. When she scolded him, actually she didn't realize that she had turned a the attachment he had for his wife to the attachment he developed later on. So that was the last time he saw his wife. He just was got some kind of awakening like this thief. He leaves that house and never goes back to his house. He became so much attached because that was the change that took place in his life. That was the awakening that he had. That if I what my wife said was correct, if I had the same attachment, of course she might have said it out of disgust, and she might not have even expected that he would leave the house. And but he developed such wonderful devotion for Rama, and we have the Ramcharitmanas, which is so famous. So many millions of people have benefited by this book. So he says this type of even pretense of spiritual practice, one would know what is real or what is permanent and what is temporary. The Lord indeed is the reality and the world transitory. Now he is giving one more example. A devotee is thinking. Now this devotee is perhaps M himself. You see, many times M would not disclose his idea, though he was sitting. How did he know that a devotee is thinking something? It is he only. So he says a devotee is thinking, is the world transitory? That is what I don't see. I think my house is permanent, my body is permanent. Of course, we think the fisherman renounced the world, but what about those? The fisherman in this case was the thief. He decided to renounce the world, but had he continued, what would happen to them? Would they also benefit from this idea of or parable of Thakur? But what about those who continue to live in the world? That is a question M is asking. Because if you remember, many times he also felt. You all know how disgusted he was with his household. And there were so many issues and problems. It was a joint family. His wife was also not so cooperative and she was creating a lot of problems, and he finally decided to put an end to his life. That is how he came to Dakshineshwar, and his life was saved because he somehow uh, came to Sri Ramakrishna without planning. He had just come to with his friend and he was about to commit suicide. So he is now asking this question because when he came in contact with Sri Ramakrishna, hearing his wonderful advice, he said, then shall I also renounce the world? So Sri Ramakrishna told him, no, no, you continue, don't worry. I'll teach you a method where you can still live in the world and realize God. So that is why this question is coming, is uppermost in his mind. He said in this fisherman's case, it was okay. He just gave up uh, he was a thief, but when he was convinced, he gave up the world and he continued his sadhana. But what about those who continue to live in the world? Must they also renounce it? Now, Sri Ramakrishna, then he himself writes, Sri Ramakrishna, the ocean of motiveless grace, immediately, as if he was reading M's mind, he knew M is perhaps thinking, or of course, he could read people's mind, he could read the disciples' mind. So immediately he says to M, just to tell him, no, that is not what I meant. Then he says, what will happen to a spiritual practitioner when he uh, decides to intensify spiritual practice? Will he lose taste for the world? Will he give up the world like the thief did in this case? He says no. He gives another example. He says, immediately reads M's mind and he says, if a clerk is sent to jail, he has to finish his term there. Obviously, he has to finish his term because he has been punished. But when he is released, does he begin to dance joyfully in the street to the beat of the drum? No, he has to go back. He again finds the job of another job of a clerk. That is what he was trained to do and takes up his old profession. So, by the grace of the Guru, having acquired jnana, having acquired the wisdom, one does not have to give up what the position one is in. One continues to live in the household as a Jivan Mukta. This advice was meant for M. Saying so, now that is why Sri Ramakrishna, uh, M has titled this, he has given the subheading that he grants fearlessness to the householders. There's one category where he tells, you see, this thief, he was just imitating the fisherman who had come to steal fish. And then when he realized that this is a better life, he just renounces. And when the thought comes in Master Mahashay's mind, whether he should also do the same thing, Sri Ramakrishna immediately reads his mind and says, no. And he gives another example, saying that if a clerk comes out of jail, that means if one realizes that this world is of a temporary nature and I should practice spiritual disciplines to hold on to God who is of whose nature is eternal, you don't have to do anything, give up anything. You continue, look for another job of a clerk and takes up his old profession. But by the grace of the Guru, having acquired jnana, having known what is the goal of my life, one can continue to live in the household as a Jivan Mukta. Saying so, Sri Ramakrishna grants fearlessness to the householders. Now, the venue is the same, the conversation is going on, but the topic changes. He's talking with Manilal. Now, this Manilal also is, perhaps he's another person or it may be M. Then Manilal is asking a question, whoever he is, because M had a tendency to change his name often to make it look as if many people are asking him questions. If he just keeps on asking questions himself, then it will be a dialogue between him and his disciple. So he didn't want. He says Manilal. Maybe it is a person or maybe his own pseudonym, another name. He is asking Sri Ramakrishna, at what place should I meditate? At what place? Place means which part of the body. The center of consciousness is very important. At what place should I meditate during my daily worship? So Sri Ramakrishna tells him a well-known fact that heart is a well-known place. Meditate on God there. All the traditions, whether it is Hindu tradition or even the Christian tradition, they always call their prayer or their meditation as the prayer of the heart or meditation in the heart. Even the Buddhists speak of the heart chakra. So heart is not the physical heart which is on the left, but is the spiritual heart which is the center of our being, the center of our personality. We all know that in Kundalini or in the Kundalini yoga or tantras, they have this concept of 6 chakras, 3 lower chakras, 3 higher chakras. So the 3 lower chakras drag you towards the body, and when you start the spiritual practice, you start with the heart and then go to slowly ascend the different chakras. That means your consciousness changes from a lower consciousness, which is animal consciousness, to the human consciousness, and from human to the divine. So heart is a well-known place. Meditate on God there. Then the next topic is faith is all important. Haladhari, who is related to Sri Ramakrishna, believes in formless God, and Shambhu's belief. Shambhu Charan Malik was also a very close devotee of Sri Ramakrishna. In fact, he was one of the suppliers. He was a very rich person, but he liked to serve, and Sri Ramakrishna used to often tell him, serve the devotees. You don't have to give me money, but whenever these devotees come, try to feed them that will give you a lot of merit. Because he knew, he said Shambhucharan Malik could afford. There were so many uh, devotees who had, sometimes he would even tell him to pay the carriage fare of some people who had come all the way. They could not afford the carriage fare. So Shambhucharan Malik used to help in various ways the devotees who had come. So Sri Ramakrishna was very particular. He knew the economic background of all those who had come, and he would be very particular not only about their spiritual welfare, but see that they got back home after the sessions which were held very often late into the night. How would they go? They had to walk all their way to Kolkata or to their place. So he would ask some of the rich devotees who could afford carriage to give a lift to some of the other people. So he was a Brahmo devotee. Manilal, okay. Manilal is perhaps here he is M himself, because M was a Brahmo devotee. And if you remember in the first meeting, Sri Ramakrishna asked him, do you believe in a God with form or without form? And he says, I believe in God without form. That is what Brahmos believed. So he says, Manilal is a Brahmo devotee who believes in the formless God. Addressing him, Thakur says, Kabir used to say that God with form was his mother and the formless God was his father. I mean, that is how Kabir used to express, because he also believed in a formless God according to his path, according to his sect. The Kabir songs, if you see, most of them are speak of a formless God. But at the same time, he was initiated into the Rama mantra. So obviously, he believed in Rama with form. But at the same time, he believed in a Nirguna Brahman or formless God. So Thakur is giving his example. So Kabir reconciled it so beautifully. He said, if I consider God as a mother, she is close, she is with form. And God the Father is the formless God is like his father. You are normally close to your mother than your father. So formless God, the relationship is impersonal. And with mother, your relationship is more personal, like what you have when you believe in God with form. And then he added, whom to slight and whom to worship. I need both father, the love of my father and mother, both the sides of the scales. This is a poem. This is a perhaps a doha from Kabir, which Thakur might have heard. So he's saying, see, he has reconciled this idea, because Sri Ramakrishna also used to tell him during the first meeting, he said, I don't believe in God with form, which Brahmos did not like. The Brahmos used to believe, Brahmo Samaj people, they used to say that worshipping Kali is a great mistake, that she is a tamasic deity and uh, you should not worship God with form. So most of the Brahmo devotees, including Swami Vivekananda, they did not in the initial stages go to even to the Kali temple, because going and bowing before a image was according to them blasphemy. So in the Brahmo prayers, you will find only they are worshipping God and used to refer to him as Father. So Kabir, Thakur quotes that Kabir said, God without form is fine. He is like the father. But I accept God with form as the mother. So there's no confusion. Who is superior, who is inferior? I need both my father and mother. Both the sides of the scale are even. So Haladari, who used to live with God with form during the day, well, that is another way of sadhana. Haladari used to live with God with form during the day, because he was a pujari, he used to assist in puja. So he will lose his job if he says, I don't believe in a God with form. So he used to do puja. So during the day, he would worship God with form. So it was easy for him to reconcile. And he worshipped the formless God at night, where he doesn't have to do his duty. That is why Sri Ramakrishna says, whichever bhava you adopt, you can succeed if you have the right kind of faith. So you see how we reconcile during the day, because I have to worship a personal God. I believe in that, and when I finish my duties, then I focus on the same God who has now become formless for me. Whether you believe in God with form or in the formless God, The essential thing is that you must have sincere faith. So then he is telling another story to cement this point. The first ecstasy, is the Lord the doer or is it coincidence? I mean, is he responsible for all that happens to us? Is he the doer? Or it's just a coincidence and we say, oh, it is because of God's grace. There are people who go to a shrine and then pray, and then suddenly some prayer is answered. Some will say, no, it is just coincidence. Why should I give credit to God? Swami Vivekananda, in initial stages, in fact, in one of his talks in San Francisco, he said he was trying to preach Advaita. So there's no question of asking God for some favors. And he did not like that attitude because he felt that we don't go to God to ask him of silly gifts. So once one devoted Christian, old Christian lady said it is thank because they have been taught, they believe in God, though they do not believe in God with form, they attribute everything, every success, even earning money to God's grace. In fact, the Protestant religion or the Calvin, not Calvin, the one who founded uh, the movement where they believed if you really want, if any person wants to prove that he has the grace of God, he should be rich. That philosophy, that particular sect of Christianity firmly believed in that. If you are poor, that means you don't have the grace of God, as if God incarnates just to give you wealth. But some people believed in that. So, if God is the doer, then every time you pray, if he doesn't do what you think he should do, give you wealth, give you this gift, that gift, and then you lose faith, then what kind of faith you have? So Shambhu Malik, who was a very rich man, obviously belonged to the first category, who believed that it is by God's grace that I am rich when others are poor. So Shambhu Malik used to come to his garden on foot from Bagh Bazar. Somebody said to him, it is so far away, why don't you take a cab? He was very rich. Some misfortune could occur on the way. Maybe there would be, why don't you take a safe passage and use a cab? I mean, those days it was a horse carriage. Shambhu blushed with anger and said, what? I set out on my journey after repeating God's name. How can there be any unfortunate incident? By having faith in Him, you can do anything. I used to say that I would believe only if I saw such and such person, if such and such accountant talked to me. That is how Shambhu tested God. He used to sometimes believe that I should see this person. If I see this person today, that means God is there. So God should make me meet all these things. And at that time, whatever used to come, whatever used to come to my mind would come to pass. So M had studied logic. Now M is sitting there and listening to what is going on, what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. He had read that it is just coincidence that the morning dreams tally with actual events. We don't have to be superstitious just because it was a morning dream and it happened. It may be just coincidence. So logic, modern logic tells this. So, and that in fact, it was just a superstition. To call this coincidence the will of God. He had read this from a chapter on fallacies. He had read English logic, so naturally, once Sri Ramakrishna wanted to know, what do you teach in school? He said, I teach logic. What does your logic say? So, he used to give these examples, whatever he taught in the school. That English logic says that you dream something, and some people believe that morning dreams come true. And if it actually happens, it is just a coincidence. Logic will tell you not to believe that it is because you had a morning dream, because many times you have a morning dream and it doesn't happen. So logic says don't believe. Just consider it to be a superstition, even if it happens or even if it doesn't happen. So he had read this, so he asked Sri Ramakrishna. Now he has this doubt whether we should consider it as a grace of God or as just a coincidence. If we follow logic, it has to be coincidence. And if we have faith in God, or at least we think it is God who has done this. So M says, well, did it ever happen that the actual event did not tally with what you thought? Means every time you thought, of course, there was a stage in Sri Ramakrishna's life. They used to say that because he was so much wedded to truth, that whatever sankalpa he made, they are known as sankalpa siddha purushas. That means only rare people, they have this. If you hold on to truth for a period of 12 years, even by mistake you don't speak a untruth. Patanjali's yoga says, in the yoga they say one of the powers is that you become a sankalpa siddha, which Haladari was. Once he, out of anger, told Sri Ramakrishna. He was angry on Sri Ramakrishna for some reason. Then he said, "You will vomit blood." And then Sri Ramakrishna knew that because Haladari was a man who practiced truth for a long time, his words will become true. Whatever sankalpa or whatever words have come out, that is a rare case. It doesn't happen. So M is having doubts because he has read English logic. He said, when you were in that state where whatever you thought, see, for example, when he was doing sadhana, he just thought, if I had a nice kutir on the bank of the Ganga, and I don't have to live with the people there in the kuti, room where so many people were disturbing him. So he wanted to live as a recluse, and suddenly when that sankalpa came, he saw from nowhere this uh, bamboos and other stuff, including the thread, because they used to bring build bamboo huts. Even everything, the roof, everything floated. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but the Sri Ramakrishna said such sankalpas during one stage of his life, they came true whenever he had a thought. Now, for that, he had to do lot of sadhana. You see, M writes uh, in his reminiscences of Sri Ramakrishna that he was so much wedded to truth. Once he told Shambhucharan Malik that, not Shambhucharan, or some doctor, some Ayurvedic doctor, that he will come and collect some medicine. And at night he suddenly realized I had given him the word. So then he woke up everyone, told Hriday, let us go. And he said, everything, the house is closed, we should not disturb them. He said, it's okay, even if we don't get the medicine. But since I said I will come, I will go. So he goes there, even enters the compound, opens the door and shouts loudly, I have come. Of course, obviously the doctor doesn't get up. But he says, I have done my job because I had promised I will come, I will go, even if I don't get the medicine. So he just goes full. So that holding on to truth for quite a long period made him, that is what he's saying, whatever I thought, any sankalpa coming to my mind, it happened. And then one more example M is giving in his reminiscences, that whenever Sri Ramakrishna sat talking with devotees, he would suddenly make a remark. Now I have to go and pray to Ma Bhavatarani, go to the shrine. So then there was no delay, immediately would get up and start walking fast. And on the way, if somebody stopped him, he would not stop. He would say, this is my sankalpa. I have decided to go. I'll first finish that. And then those people had to wait. He will finish what he had made a sankalpa. And then he goes, does his pranams or whatever he had decided, then comes back, and then on the way, nobody could stop him. He was so one-pointed, and in Bengali they say man mukh ek karam, and whatever you speak, whatever you utter, you just first do it. There's no question of contradiction. So this happens to such a person who has observed this. So the whole environment is created where whatever he comes to my mind would come to pass. Now M is thinking, has it ever happened that it has not tallied. What you thought has not happened. Now, there's a very interesting question he's putting. Sri Krishna says, it always tallied. I would repeat his name and whatever I believed would come to pass. Then he's telling him, but do you know the fact? Unless you are guileless and generous, these are the two conditions. You should not be selfish. Otherwise, selfish people will go on making wishes, and if God grants those wishes, it can be dangerous. He said, unless you are guileless, you really have that faith in God, and you are generous, that you are not going to use it, the sankalpas, to harm anyone or for your own selfish purpose, you will not have that kind of sincere faith. Then he gives something which surprised all the doctors sitting there. He was so keen in his observation. He could not only read the mind, but he could judge a person by his physical traits. Then he says these things. It just comes out of his mouth, and M has recorded that. He says, people with such physical traits as a neck bone that is too prominent. Now, these are the observations he made. Maybe, I don't know whether a study has been made. Those who have squint eyes, or they do not easily acquire faith. It's not that they don't acquire faith, but they find it very difficult. Some physical traits are not conducive to have Shraddha or faith. It is a misfortune to meet bad omens such as a banana tree in the south. This was just what they believed, and perhaps Sri Ramakrishna took it very seriously. And the Pui creeper, Pui sak they call, Bengali, in the north, and a black tomcat passing in front of you. All laugh. This was, of course, in a very light mood he was saying. So, but he said there are certain signs. All this may not always happen, but it may happen to a person who 100% who has faith. But he says, unless you are guileless and generous, you will not have that kind of faith. That means everybody's sankalpa will not be fulfilled. It is only some people, rare cases like Sri Ramakrishna. And then, yeah, we'll conclude now because the new topic, uh, yeah. So it is dusk now. We'll conclude. The maid servant has come and burns incense in the room. That is Vrinde, who was uh, always used to come. She was employed by the Dakshineshwar temple authorities. She used to do her regular duty, and Sri Ramakrishna was so much concerned about every person that if the prasad used to come from the temple, he would always keep something for this maid servant, humble maid. She never demanded anything. And then he would tell if by some misfortune the prasad was over, he would get anxious. He said, oh, you bring Vrinde's stuff, or she will get angry. She used to get angry not because she was very innocent, but at the same time she knew Sri Ramakrishna gave her as much attention as he would go give his own disciples. So they used to run and get some prasad from the temple and keep it for her. So she has come and she has done her duty, burns incense in the room in the evening. That is perhaps what they did, what she was asked to do, one of her duties. Manilal has left, but there are still one or two people in the room. While going, he saw that there were still. Thakur is sitting on the smaller cot. Rakal is also there, that is Swami Brahmananda. After some time, Bhagavati, the maid servant of the temple proprietor, who was also a great devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, that is, who worked with Mathur Babu, salutes Sri Ramakrishna from a distance. Because that is how the royal or aristocratic families, they would not allow the servants to come very near. Maybe that was the orthodox untouchability and other things. But whatever it was, or at least that was the way they were asked to behave. So she was asked, saluting him from a distance because of her habits. Thakur says, no, no, you come here, come near. Thakur asks her to sit down. She has been serving for a very long time. The owners of Dakshineshwar temple, that is Mathur Babu, Rani Rasmani's family. She has been with the proprietor for many years. Thakur has known her for many years. Since childhood, she has been temperamental, but Thakur is an ocean of compassion. a savior of the fallen. She was very temperamental because she worked with a very rich family. So naturally, she was very rough in her, very temperamental and rough to people. But Thakur is still very kind and compassionate. He talks to her about things of the past. And Sri Ramakrishna is telling her, "You are getting old. Do you feed sadhus and Vaishnavas with the money you earn?" She was obviously working in such a rich family. Then Bhagavati is smiling. He said, "How can I say that? You have been to Kashi, Vrindavan, and so forth." Bhagavati became a bit hesitant. "How can I say it myself? I have paid for a building, a ghat paved with stones, and my name is engraved on one of the slabs." She was so rich. I mean, she was obviously rich to have a ghat paved with stones and her name in Banaras. Then Sri Krishna, "What are you saying? You see, my name is engraved there as Srimati Bhagavati Devi," though she was just a servant. But she, then Sri Krishna doesn't disappoint and said, "Very nice, very nice." Then Sri Krishna uh, consoles her because as soon as she comes and touches his feet, Thakur was very sensitive. You see, obviously, she was desirous of name and fame. So, whatever little money she had, of course, money, but she wanted some kind of name and fame. And Sri Krishna could not tolerate that. But when she touched Sri Krishna's feet, he felt as if he was bitten by a scorpion. He could not, but he kept quiet, let her. When she went away, he took some Ganges water and washed his feet with that. So all these things are happening, and then he sings some songs to console her because she obviously was still sitting there and knew that something has happened. Maybe Sri Krishna was very sensitive to my touch, but very compassionately he makes her forget that incident and said, "No, no, God, his mother is very compassionate." And he sings a few Bengali songs on Divine Mother Shama. So we'll conclude now. If there are some questions, you can in the chat. We still have a few minutes. Any question based on what we discussed today? Shall I conclude? Somebody's typing. Okay. Yeah, yeah.
That the eternal God is only the
Permanent, yeah. Eternal reality.
us everything.
Yeah.
And that is ever changing.
It's of a temporary nature in the sense some things may be more temporary than others, like the fleeting things. Some may be more uh, more permanent in the sense it lasts for a long time. So, but in any case, everything in Prakriti is temporary. So, sooner we accept that, including our health, our age, our life, our longevity, uh, our money, whatever, they keep on changing, fluctuating. That is why it is known as temporary. It's the only eternal thing, that is the whole of religion, that before we die, we somehow have to connect ourselves with something which does not change. And then we are safe because then we can live with the temporary. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. It's not that like some of the Advaita philosophers, they will say everything is an illusion, so you have to give up the world. So Sri Ramakrishna doesn't say that. He said, know that this is temporary. After knowing that, after having the knowledge that it is temporary, then it doesn't really matter. So you're not bothered whether it stays with you, how long it stays with you, the people, the things. You see, there is a flux. Always in Prakriti, you'll see nothing seems to be of a permanent nature. But because we suffer only because Buddha's main philosophy was that. He said the only way to get rid of misery and reach nirvana and eternal happiness is to Just accept the fact that everything is changing it. It is moving. So there is nothing, even the mind, it changes. The things, the people, everything changes. So their philosophy is just to watch, observe this changing nature and don't get involved and allow the change to happen without getting affected by it. If you think that the temporary thing is eternal, then there will be misery because when it goes, you feel the loss. But if you convince your mind that it is temporary, maybe it may last for a longer time than other things, but still it is temporary. So the goal of religious life or spiritual life is to attach ourselves or align ourselves to the real, which is God, because the very definition of God, whichever God you believe in, is that He is eternal, is always going to exist. So that is how we hold on to the eternal. So spiritual life means that slowly detaching from the temporary and attaching yourself to the eternal. That is the idea.
Yeah, I have one question.
Yeah, just a second. Is there have they finished typing? 1 minute. So read it.
To bad appearances and
No, 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 no.
personality.
No, no. The
Is this in the mind or behavior happening for good or not? Up to the mark, expect.
it's a very um, confusing question. But anyway, the question that is been asked, the chat, is Sri Ramakrishna gave some signs that if you have a squint or he just gave a few hints, but those were general hints. We know of at least one disciple of Sri Ramakrishna who had a squint, but he was a great disciple. That is Swami Sarvasthananda. He had a very distinct squint in his eyes, but still he became one of the great biographers and one of the great saints. So it's just a general tendency he used to see. He used to weigh somebody's hand and said if it weighs too much, then that means that person will find it difficult to attain spiritual life. So the question that is been asked on the chat, whether if somebody is not good looking, or is that also a sign that that is absolutely wrong, because if you see Ashtavakra, his personality, his description, he was very ugly to look at. So there is no connection between a good looking person. In fact, a good looking person may not be spiritual, or a ugly looking person may be highly spiritual. So that has no connection. That is the first part. The second part is what? It's a bit confusing. Can you rephrase it? The second part is not very clear. Whoever has asked the second part, first part I've answered. Second part, you have to rephrase it and tell exactly what you want to ask. Your question?
Talking about the nature of the universe. All is permanent. As you said, Nitya, Anitya, you said in that context.
Anitya means temporary.
Con- contrast with what Advaita say that Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya.
Mithya means, yeah. Yes. Yeah. 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 That's what I'm saying. Illusion and temporary nature. You see, when you believe in Prakriti, the Prakriti means nature. So if you go to Sankhya philosophy, there is one Purusha, the pure consciousness, which is eternal, which does not change. And the play of Prakriti is what we normally see. We perceive Prakriti because of our gross minds, because our minds teach us to see Prakriti, and that Prakriti we see changes every moment. The same thing is not there. So that is why it is known as samsara. Samsara means the word that we normally use to describe worldliness. Sarati means to move. Samsara means one which keeps on moving. Nothing remains permanent, it keeps on changing. That is why it is known as sansara. Opposed to that, the idea of God is that He is eternal. Now, coming to Advaita, what they say as illusion, They say it illusion when the you realize that it is an illusion when your mind vanishes. They are speaking from a point of view where the mind, temporary mind itself, is merged in the highest Atman or reality. Then what happens is the world that you saw with your mind, when you see with one particular mind, he sees the world in a different way. The other mind may be living in the same house, same place. He sees his world is different. His world is very ugly, bad, very bad to him. And some say, no, this world is fine. So it depends on the mind. So world is the mind plus something which is outside. So that something which is outside is an illusion, because as long as the mind is there, you see that illusion as real. That is why Shankaracharya in his Advaita he says Vyavarika Satya and Paramarthika Satya. So there are two truths. One is it appears as if it is true, because Shankaracharya could not deny that he has a body, there is somebody. How can you deny when you see it? So your mind is seeing the body, seeing your body, seeing others' actions, all the karma which is happening, it is really happening. So he explains illusion as, oh, that is Satya, but it is Vyavarika. It's a practical. So it's the same thing, whether you call it temporary, the Dvaitwadins or the Sankhya philosophers, they'll say Prakriti is real because she's uh, creating this illusion that this is permanent. Yudhishthira in the Mahabharata says, we think we'll never die. That is the most surprising thing. Every moment we think we are going to live, when we know that one day we have to die. But do we always remind ourselves that we are going to die, we always think, oh, we are going to live, nothing is going to happen. Somebody may be suffering from cancer or something. Oh, he may die, but I am going to live. So that continuous assertion of eternity, even when you know for certain that death is certain, that is why Nachiketa was, at the age of 14, he was surprised to see how much people, his father is imagining that he will do some yagna and go to heaven. He says, you only told me it is temporary. Why are you running after this foolish heaven, which is also temporary? So he was wiser than his father. So he wanted to go to Yama himself and ask, you solve the problem once for all. What will happen after death? If it is temporary, why are you forcing me to run after this thing? So Yama wants to avoid this question because it is a difficult question and he thinks he's a young boy. So he tells him, no, no, I give you this wealth, that wealth. He said, don't fool me with your temporary things. You keep all the wealth, you keep all the kingdom which you are offering me to yourself. You tell me the permanent nature of the human soul. What will happen after I die? Don't give me the stories of heaven and other things. I know there these stages are there. Just as I might live for 60 years or 70 years. After that, there will be an extension. But even then, scriptures say that you will have to come born again. So I don't want this temporary solution. I want a permanent solution. Tell me what is immortality, what is the soul, what happens after death, how do I realize that eternal nature. So it is the same, but in Dvaita or in Sankhya and other philosophies, you call it temporary. You call it illusion or some kind of Maya in Advaita. Because the mind, when it is not there, the world vanishes. So whether it is temporary or how temporary the Vyavarik Satya also doesn't exist. Then you only think of Brahman. But that is a very high state. Yeah. What is the question? Rephrased it. Okay.
One's behavior or attitude
Hmm.
happening is up to the mind's perspective after trying to mend it.
Trying to mend it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the question is how to modify or mend our behavior after knowing. Obviously, when you don't know what is good, what is bad, then you will not change. But after knowing, that is the question, if I get it right. Yeah.
Can you get clues from
Yes, yes. It's a very nice. Now, after rephrasing it, it's a very good question. How can one know whether one is running after the temporary, or what is good, what is evil. So, the simple definition of good and evil Swami Vivekananda gives is anything that takes you towards the eternal truth is good. Anything that takes you away and makes you cling to the temporary, thinking that it is permanent, is evil. So, this is the simple definition of good and evil. Now, how to decide? That is the question. That cannot be done with the faculty of mind which we normally have, that is known as manas. We have two minds, according to, at least that's one way of classifying. We have four aspects of the mind, but at least two are very clear: the manomaya kosha and the vijnanamaya kosha. That is the reactive mind and the choice making mind, or the intuitive mind, which can tell you what is good, what is bad. That is what Nachiketa was confused. He said, how can I tell my father that what he is doing is wrong? He seems to think that he is right when he is performing all this, giving old cows as gifts, which will be useless to the person who receives them. It's not giving milk any longer, and he's trying to cheat and doing this puja, or that yajna ritual, which he believes will take him to heaven. So how do I remove his ignorance? So then Yama tells Nachiketa, Yama the king of death, he says two things approach a person, every human being in this world. There is Shreya and Preya. Shreya means that which is good for you, and Preya means that which is pleasant. So sometimes we confuse the pleasant thing for a good thing. So good thing can be unpleasant, but still it is good for you. Like medicines, it may not be, it may be bitter, it may be forced. We have to force to take the treatment, but it is, since it is good, it may not be pleasant. So he says the wise person knows the difference between Shreya and Preya. Preya is that which is pleasant, and the people, 90%, most of the people follow the prayer, because we want to uh, have a pleasant experience. We don't want to have something which is good but unpleasant, which is difficult. So that is how Yama says, tells Nachiketa, this is how you distinguish. But how to get that choice, how to make that choice? First, to know which is pleasant or which is good for me. So that is when you awaken a faculty which is not just a reactive mind, it is not manas, it is buddhi. So in spiritual life, when spiritual life begins, first thing that happens is you develop discrimination between good, between Shreya and Preya. That is what Nachiketa is told, that you have to struggle for that, because to develop that buddhi, you have to do meditation, you have to awaken that buddhi, that capacity to make the right choice, to choose Shreya over Preya. And he says you have to do it every moment, you have to be very alert, very alert. He says it is like walking on the edge of a razor. You can't afford to make a single mistake. So he says it is difficult, but it is not impossible. You have to try. Many times you will make a mistake, make wrong choices. Then you have to go back, make the right choice. But very often in life, we find that once we make a wrong choice, it leads to a chain reaction. Then we go on making wrong choices. To solve that, we make another wrong choice. Then it's like a chain reaction. So in the first place, you have to be very careful. So Vivek Chudamani, which Shankaracharya wrote, was very important in the sense it teaches a person to develop his viveka or discrimination, which enhances the buddhi. So to make the right choice, that is the answer to your question, that to make the right choice, to know what is good, what is evil, there is no other way but to pray as we do in the Gayatri, Dhiyo Yona Prachodayata, Om Bhur Swaha. That means it is a constant prayer which we have to address to the light of knowledge, that is sun. Sun is a symbolic of knowledge. So let that ignorance, that daylight of ignorance always uh, remove all the darkness of ignorance. That is the essence of all mantras, but especially the Gayatri. So Gayatri is a prayer which where you always pray, and it should be taught to the children at the age of between 6 and 8. That was our tradition. He has to start very early in life, boys and girls both, that they should have that choice making capacity so that they don't end up with a miserable life because of the wrong choices they make. It's so difficult to make the right choice in life. So, this discrimination to choose between good and evil is not a very easy thing. You have to develop a higher faculty for that. Okay. So, we'll conclude now. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.